So welcome back to the podcast, everybody. As ever, I am Paul Morrow here on the Ops Desk, and today we have a really interesting guest. I'm really excited. We have Ryan Morrow, no relation, even though he DM'd me and says people ask him if I'm his father, which I have mixed feelings about that. I got to think about how I feel about that. But in any case, actually, I'm flattered that people think we're related because he's doing really, really insightful work. And he is, let me do your introduction, a counter-extremism and international security analyst who recently released a report published by the Capital Research Center on George Soros' Open Society Foundation. And that's why we wanted to talk to him, because the Trump administration has made no secret of the fact that they want to look at this ecosystem of NGOs throwing money all over the place. A lot of it goes back to Soros. A lot of it doesn't. The stuff bounces all over the place. Nobody can keep track of it. Ryan has done some really penetrative work on it. We're going to talk to him today. So, Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
So this is really interesting, and you're right where I think a lot of us are, which is, wow, I didn't know any of this stuff was going on. And I have to tell you, I'm very glad we got guys like you to crunch the numbers and dig into this stuff, because it's really nested. It can be really difficult by design, I'm sure, on their part, and it needs to be teased out so we can all understand it. So dumb it down for us a little bit. Give us the thumbnail. What'd you find? What's going on?
Sure. Basically, the thumbnail sketch is that you have this entire nonprofit-centered infrastructure that sustains this ecosystem of hate. So it's not just about the people that are giving possibly checks to people that are doing individual criminal acts, buying the bricks that are thrown at police and things like that. The more expensive and more difficult investment is creating that overall ecosystem. You have to have people that make this stuff popular and legitimate and make it so that we talk about it. And so that's kind of where my mind has been at, as well as, of course, any individual potential violations of the law. But this is an infrastructure, and that means that this can be defeated. It's not just random wackos here and there. And so the first report that I did that's related to this is called Marching Towards Violence. And basically what I did was, we believe it's the biggest study of the anti-Israel protests that anyone ever did after October 7th. And I found over 150 pro-terrorism groups were organizing it. I found barely any that were actually peaceful and just opposed Israel. They're almost all terror apologists.
And what were they doing? They were organizing marches?
Yeah, the riots, the protests on college campuses, it's like hitting a button.
Right.
I mean, they had a script already ready to go that was used before. It's the same groups. And so I was shocked by that. And the question then everyone asks is, well, where's the funding come from? And then, of course, is it connected to George Soros? And to be honest with you, I've seen so many people exaggerate about George Soros, and I've seen anti-Semites use it to try to make everything sound like a Jewish conspiracy, that I wasn't particularly interested in looking at George Soros. I figured if it was out there, someone else already found it. And there was so much exaggeration. It was just kind of like a little bit of a headache. But I go to the website for the Open Society Foundations, which is his nonprofit army. And you can search his grants with descriptions provided by his own organization. And I started noticing some of these names over and over again that are connected to that network. And I said, my God, there's more than a kernel of truth to what people have been saying. And so I realized there was this knowledge gap where nobody had gone through as many grants as they could find to tally this up and get an idea of, like, well, how much of this is actually funded by Soros? What's the truth here? Because there's so much rhetoric. And what I found is that at the very least, over $80 million since 2016 went from Open Society Foundations, George and Alexander Soros's network, to at least 54 groups that are pro-terrorism. Either they celebrate the October 7th attacks, or they celebrated Antifa, or engaged in domestic terrorism on U.S. soil, or tried to facilitate it. I mean, the highest possible bar you could ask for, property destruction and things like that, or are associated with terror advocates or foreign terrorist organizations. But I was using the absolute highest bar to the point that I excluded from that total groups that are arguably anti-Semitic, definitely anti-American, want to see Israel destroyed. I just focus on that strict, narrow category of being pro-terrorism. And those are the astounding numbers I came up with.
So I got to ask you now, and by the way, we've had Matt Palumbo, who's written the books on Soros. You know, he's his biographer, essentially, obviously unauthorized. So None of this surprises me because I came to Soros with a little bit of the same skepticism you did. And we should be clear. Soros isn't only the only bad guy funder out there. There are these foundations all over the place. There's the Billionaire Wives Club that give away money like it's candy so that they can feel better about themselves at cocktail parties. And I'm sorry to be so snarky, but that's my read on it. And they give this money away willy nilly without really ascertaining where it goes. But the Soros thing is so interesting because, as you say, they are anti-Israel, these groups, but he's Jewish. And so a lot of people will cry anti-Semitism when people scrutinize Soros, but yet the scrutiny is on behalf of Israel and the fact that he seems to be funding people that are so vehemently anti-Israel. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And the thing is that the Open Society Foundations have been confronted about this in the past, so they can't claim that they don't know about any of it, and they just
Mm,
respond to whatever degree they do respond. Usually, it's just this boilerplate, just denial, like, no, we don't do that. Like
right.
that's the most they'll give you is they'll say, oh well, if it was illegal, then we couldn't do it and we wouldn't do it. Like that's their threshold for morality. That's their best defense is, oh well, it's legal. But why are you choosing these groups? Why is it that these groups get reported on? How come you're not even Googling them? I said on the Charlie Kirk show 1 week after he was martyred, when I released this with Glenn Beck, I said, whatever the differences are between me and a nonprofit on whatever issue, I will volunteer my time to whatever degree I can to go through your grant and make sure you're not funding terrorists because I care about this issue. And if you're mistakenly funding terrorists and pro-terrorist groups, I would like to help you stop that. And
And
so
I'm
at
sure,
this
and I'm sure
point,
they took you right up on that.
nobody called.
Of course.
And so this is how Soros's group has responded to this, just a blanket denial. And when honestly, if it was just a mistake, they'd be much better off being like, all right, so we've put in corrective measures. We hate the right, it's a free speech issue, but all right, we're going to clean up our act. You won't even get that from them.
Well, he's very heavily lawyered, as we know. He's got an army of lawyers, and they look at all of this stuff. So I'm not entirely surprised that they're being so taciturn in their responses. But you tease out something very important, which is this. You've notified them, as have others, that this funding is going to groups that are arguably either terrorist adjacent or very close proximity and maybe over the line. That means they have knowledge. And the reason I bring that up is because for a lot of the potential criminal charges that you could bring in this arena, material support to terrorism, a RICO, espionage, a conspiracy case, a lot of these cases, they're not strict liability, meaning you have to show intent. You're going to have to show if he's been operating with foreign nationals against America or if he's been engaging in material support to groups that are terrorist related. You can show now, hey, look, we told you. You can't claim ignorance. We've been telling you you can't be giving to these groups, yet you kept doing it. And that's the piece that surprises me, Ryan, because that would be where they would go if the Trump DOJ ever comes at them to say you're funding some real bad guys. They can't say at this point, oh, we didn't realize because people like you have told them. So I'm very surprised. You and I were talking offline, and I'm very surprised that DOJ so far hasn't reached out to you. But as you say, you did this from Open Society's own filings, right?
That's right. And on their website, they say this is the stuff they're comfortable telling you about. Like you
Mm.
could, like they actually say we're only publishing the grants when it will not put any risk on the part of the grantee or pose any danger to Soros's groups. So if this is the type of thing they're comfortable telling us, then what the hell are they hiding? My
Yeah.
God. It's really unbelievable. And also, there's another angle because even though the New York Times did confirm that the Justice Department essentially launched investigations, citing my report, that was the trigger. They basically put out a directive to at least six attorneys' offices in 6 different states saying to prepare to launch the investigation based on the
Sure.
report. But there's an easier angle here. And of course, I mean, if an investigation yields the necessary evidence for filing charges, go for it. But there seems to be a more clear violation going on here with easier action that can be taken, which is that the IRS code
Yeah.
regulating nonprofits
Sure.
does explicitly says you cannot engage in facilitating criminal activity, sponsoring criminal activity. It even uses the word encouraging that
Right.
type of criminal activity, even if it's called civil disobedience. If it violates a local ordinance, then you're not supposed to have a nonprofit spending donors' money doing that. And so Soros and their allies, and man, does he have a lot of allies. He's rallied a true army of nonprofit allies who have probably not even read the report. And they're trying to frame this as a free speech issue, saying, "Oh, they're trying to take away free speech."
Of course.
The Constitution doesn't say that you have a natural right that you're born with a tax exempt nonprofit. That's a privilege. You have to apply for it.
Sure.
It's a totally deceitful argument.
It's the lamest excuse ever, and it is the last refuge. The old saying goes, patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. I forget who said it, one of the founding
Mhm.
fathers. But leaning on the First Amendment for things like this is always the last refuge because people hear it and they think liberty, they think the Bill of Rights, and so it invokes all of that. And as Americans, we have a very visceral response to that. And to be fair, the First Amendment is the most sacrosanct aspect of American society. There's a reason it's first, all right? And it is really the foundation of what makes America unique among the world's nations, and I'm including other Western and elsewhere nations that are democracies. But as a constitutional republic, there is a limit. We have a constitution, yes, but there is a limit on what you can do under the First Amendment. The famous, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There are all kinds of tests for it. And as you say, they're going to have major tax issues relative to all this. Now, I got to ask you a real fundamental question that I always bump into whenever I start poking at this kind of a world. Relative to what he's doing with just, let's stay with just Open Society, because I know he has other groups, but just relative to Open Society, do you understand it? That is to say, do you understand the entire universe of what he's doing? Because I've never met anybody who does. I'm not sure they do, and I think that's by design. What's your take?
There's very little that has to be disclosed. And so again, keep in mind the report, when I describe what the grants are going for, I'm using their own words.
Right, right,
And when I
right.
say what the organizations that receive the money, what they're doing, I'm using words from their website mostly. So they know what's going on, but what their allies like the New York Times are doing. And keep in mind, the New York Times basically did 3 articles about this. The first one was about the Justice Department launching an investigation based on this report.
Mm.
The second one was, I think they thought it was a hit piece, but I liked it because it flat out said, look, this report shows Soros's money going to groups that celebrate the October 7th attacks and who advocate for property destruction on U.S. soil and things like that. Which was, I thought, a big vindication because that really discredits Soros and their denials. And then the third one, they said, well, you can. They tried to trash us. They lied in several different ways. But their main argument was, well, you can't show that Soros deliberately gave money and then that money was used purposely for a specific act of terrorism or crime. Like what human being can reach that standard outside of the government without subpoenas?
I was
Like
about to say,
it's
how the hell did
unbelievable.
they know? You didn't even do the investigation yet. And not only that, but I would argue that the strength of the evidence right now is on your side because, as you articulate, they've already been told that a lot of these groups are engaging in this kind of stuff, and the money spigot has not been turned off. This is classic New York Times. It's noise. It's what they want to believe. It's what the people who read the Times want to believe. I hate to be so pejorative towards the Times because it's a cliche, but
Yeah.
I want to read the thing. I wish I could. Every time I try, I say I can't waste my time on this. And that's what the Times has lost. You can't trust them anymore. Even if they break a big story, I can't believe what they're saying because of bullshit like this. And that's just the truth to them. Let's move on because I want to put some meat on the bone with this here because, we're being very generic. Okay, groups that have done this, groups have done that. I want to ask about some of the specific groups. Let's stick to domestic now. You articulate that there are 7 groups that are potentially terrorist related that have received $23 million. I think this is where the rubber is going to hit the road. You could have criminal charges relative to other groups, but the terrorism stuff is the stuff that's going to perk up the ears of the prosecutors. Tell me about these groups. You don't have to name them all, but tell me about these groups. Give me one or two and tell me what they've been doing with this 23 million bucks.
Sure. So these groups, they either directly engage in criminal activity that fits the FBI's definition of terrorism, of
Yeah.
domestic terrorism, because even harassing people, doing property damage, and rioting, all that. I mean, it all fits the definition. It's just you're using different tactics that some people don't think of. It's not all about planes being hijacked and suicide bombers.
Right.
There's other things that you can do, and it fits the definition of domestic terrorism. And so these are groups that are in some way facilitating it. The biggest one I would say would be the Center for Third World Organizing,
Hmm.
because they have what they call a hub where they've brought in three other radical groups. The most significant of which is Ruckus Society,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. The business. Yeah.
everybody who studies this issue, I mean, you've probably heard of them for years and years.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
that's an
Yeah.
anarchist militant group that what they're famous for is that their website hosted militant guides on how to do criminal activity and violence
Yeah.
and things like that. And so they're officially part of a section of Center for Third World Organizing. You go to their website, it's not even hidden. In fact, they boast in their 2020 2021 report where they boast about, hey, this is what your donations are going towards, that they trained thousands and supported over 100 organizations that took part in what they called the uprisings. They're referring to the riots
Right.
of those
Of
years.
2020, I assume.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they even talk about like Minnesota and then also
Yeah.
ones that
The
happened during
Battle of Seattle
lockdown.
and all that crap. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they talk about confrontation and things. So they don't use the word violence, but they talk about, oh, we threw down in the streets. I mean, I've never heard that in a non-violent context before.
Of course.
And you look at who created Crooked Society. One of the founders used to lead an officially environmentally motivated anarchist terrorist group, an eco-terrorist group. So pretty direct connection there.
Yeah, yeah, and these guys they all circulate among themselves. Like I'm not surprised that you say, okay, there's a hub and then there's three other groups. Anybody who has no experience in this area doesn't realize how the infrastructure is so fungible. It's the money goes here, then they transfer it here, then there's a subgroup over here who pings it back to this one, who sends it over here, and it becomes this just whack-a-mole if you're trying to prosecute it. I used to run into this stuff when I was doing cases. People say follow the money. You could spend the rest of your life following the money, and they know that. So here's where I want to go on this. If you can't get to open society, that is to say, if they have insulated themselves enough in a mafia-like way, all right, there's a reason it was always so hard to get the top don is because there's 5 layers between him and the street guys. If the Open Society Foundation is insulated from where this money ends up, I'm wondering if there is going to be a possibility here because you just used the same tactics that they used on the mafia. That's why I invoked that example. You start picking off the lower groups. So you're talking about the Ruckus Society, right? So you say, okay, we got these guys. And here's why I bring it up, Ryan. Today, just fortuitously, they dropped a 2333A material support for terrorism on Antifa. This first of all, it's never been done relative to Antifa. I can only find one case since like the last 20 something years that invoked that charge. And I got to pull it apart. But 99 times out of 100, you need a foreign nexus to do a material support charge. And that's why the designation of Antifa, we don't really have a domestic terrorism law, but it looks like they're going that route. I bring all of this up because that's where I think they're going to go. Even if they can't get to Soros, if you can pick off everybody that's giving him money, a couple of things will happen. Number one, you can damage the ecosystem, but number two, you're going to get flips. And that's what they're going to be looking to do. They're look to put somebody in the box and say, did they tell you, and it may not be Soros himself, it likely won't be, he's 90-something, it's not going to be him, nor is it going to be the son, but it's going to be somebody who's distributing the money. And where I want to go on this, because I think it's just more takeable for the American public is this Al-Haq group that you articulate. This is a foreign group that does potentially implicate material support for terrorism, and it's a foreign group. So tease that out for us.
Sure. So some of the groups are mentioned in the report because the section that is not about domestic terrorists talks about the foreign terrorist organization linked entities, groups throughout the world that Soros sends money to that you can Google them and it's been widely reported that they have terror connections and you can verify it in 10 minutes.
Right.
And Al-Haq would be one of those. Very obviously a front for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is the communist counterpart to Hamas. They operate right now essentially has won. They took part in the October 7th attacks.
Oh, they're designated. That's a
Yeah.
ground ball. And if you can show, look, one of the things you got to do as prosecutors, you could say, look, they're just playing mix and match. Just because they changed the name doesn't mean it's the same, not the same guys. And that's what you'll do. You'll say it's the same guy running both things. Just because now he calls it Al Haq doesn't mean anything. So
It's just division of labor.
that's it.
They want, if you want to do 5 different things, you set up 5 different branches. You don't even necessarily have to hide it, but you might as well hide it because what you might as well protect yourself. But not much effort goes into hiding some of this.
No, it's amazing.
So
They
yeah,
don't try
right.
that hard, but they get away with it. So why bother?
How insulting is it though?
It is.
Especially for someone with law enforcement background like yourself, to me as an American, that they don't even feel like they have to put effort into hiding what they're doing. It's just giving you the finger right to your face. And so these groups, they like Al Haq, like the Al Mazan Center, that which is located
Oh
in
yeah,
Gaza,
I know them.
and
Yeah.
gets money from Soros's group, connect to Hamas and PFLP. Um, they could do a much better job of hiding this stuff. They don't respect us enough to do it.
No,
Um,
and they got
and
lawyers that
it's
tell them,
very
yeah, it's all right. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. And so to your point, though, everything that you said about the strategy is compatible with, for my own personal studies and for what people have told me in relation to this specific issue. It all makes sense. And so that's what I've said. I know there's civilian researchers out there that are doing just as good research as people I talk to in law enforcement on this because it's open source. It would be not that hard to rally for someone like myself or someone else to rally them together. Let's put together the information, start going after the tax exempt statuses of these
Mm,
groups that when the evidence justifies that they violate them. Criminal charges also, those are two separate things, but the tax code, taking away the tax exempt status is in some ways more powerful than the criminal angle. At least that's what the bad guys have said. When you go to their website, like Truth Out is one radical group that all
mm,
these places gravitate towards. And they reacted to my report that preceded the Soros one, where I explained some of this. They said that my report is, quote, an existential threat that could easily mean a quick death for most of their nonprofit structure. Those that survive, they said, would suffer mass chaos. So
wow.
they're saying that we've figured out how to beat them, and
Mm.
you're describing an important part of it, which is that if Soros, it's too big of a thing right now, and you could go after open society later. Let's go after the easy ones. That helps you build a case for the more difficult ones, and you can also relatively easily, more easily than with American citizens. There's a lot of foreign entities here. I have a list of tons over the years that should be designated by the Treasury Department, the State Department for transnational crime, for material support to terrorism, potentially even for election meddling, sanctions violations. It's just, and this information has been out for years and years. It just hasn't, for some reason, the government, even including this one, hasn't yet reached out to folks like myself that I'm aware of and said, all right, let's bring it all together, get us the list, and just go one by one because we can very rapidly take this network down. This doesn't have to be like an epic long fight.
I think it's underway. I think they're putting their toe in the water. But
Yeah.
let me tell you something from the law enforcement side of things, Ryan. I used to bring terrorism cases, all kinds of cases. And I used to do money cases every now and then. What you can do sometimes is, okay, look, the terrorism thing is a little bit of a reach too far. We can't find out where the money goes. But you know what? They're laundering the money. Take them on the money laundering. And you know what? We at least put them out of business, dump the phones, dump the computers, flip a few people. We can damage the network. We can penetrate it, ascertain what's going on, put some sunlight on this. It's a lower bar, but at least you did something because these are people that want to blow up Broadway. All right. And the problem is the following, just for the sake of our audience here. The cases are not sexy. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. These are money cases that need people like yourself who have the knowledge, the patience, and the skill, the talent. And it's not everybody that can do it. I got to be honest with you. It's not easy for me. I've had the people brief me, analysts who have your kind of acumen brief me on a case. And by about the third layer, even my eyes start to glaze over. And so consequently, it's very hard to get the prosecutors excited. And the reason for that is not even a hit on anybody. It's because the prosecutors know it's going to be hard to get a grand jury excited and to understand it. And that's why I used the term dumb down at the top of the interview,
Yeah.
because that's what you got to do. You got to make it cognizable. Here's where I'm going. I'm going to use the mafia angle again. Back in the 90s, when Giuliani was the U.S. attorney here in New York, the 80s, 90s, he broke the mafia here. I don't care what anybody says, and most people will admit it. He looked at the mafia and he said, you know what? The whole thing is a RICO. I'm not taking off one family, the other family, or this group, but I'm going to take this crew. He said, let's do the entire mafia. And it became the infamous commission case. They've never recovered from that. He took 4 of the 5 families out, the heads, and was just unprecedented. It was an earthquake in this town. I wasn't even in law enforcement at the time, and I remember it being like, wow, a big deal. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm sitting where DOJ is right now. You get somebody with skill, talent, give them some analysts, talk to Ryan Morrow, talk to Matt Palumbo, talk to a few of the other people that are out there poking at this stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking at a RICO for the whole thing. Because that way, you don't have all of these issues that you're talking about relative to where did this go, where did that go, where did this go, whatever. If you can show the whole thing's a structure, and all throughout it, there are people who are gaining from it and doing illegal stuff, well, then I'm sorry, by definition, it's a RICO. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but neither was the commission case. My point is this: I think you've started something here that could be a very, very big deal. Have I heard that? No, I'm not saying that I have, but I wouldn't necessarily. We're right at the beginning of this. If it develops, I will hear. So let me ask you this to go further a little bit here on all of this. Do you see any government money going into the hoppers here? And here's why I say it. One of the things you always encounter when you do this stuff is they're getting grants. These groups, through cutouts, they're getting grants. They're tax exempt, so they get money from this one, from that one, and everything else. And you find out at the end of the day, the American taxpayers are funding Antifa. It's outrageous. Have you come across in any of your travels here any money that can be attributed to any government-funded entities?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very common thing with these groups. If it's a nonprofit, you're going to go for government grants on the state level, on the federal level. And we didn't do an analysis of all of the groups mentioned in this report for that specific angle because we're just looking at that one revenue stream
Yeah.
coming from Soros and Open Society foundations. But that's an openly known. You'll even have like radical mosques that get Homeland Security grants because there'll be grants to provide more protection for your house of worship, and so radical mosques will apply for that. But money is fungible, so it just helps the overall system, exactly like you're saying, because it really is an infrastructure. And one of the ways that this is hidden though and makes this difficult is the fiscal sponsorship. So you'll hear the name of a group and you'll assume that it is a registered independent entity.
Right.
But actually, what will happen is it's a fiscally sponsored project. And what that means is an organization that has a nonprofit status will loan it to another group that exists but does not have that. And so that group that you're hearing about that's doing a lot of bad things, like Within Our Lifetime and all these other ones, you'll assume the money's going like directly to them. But what they're actually operating as is a project of another group with nonprofit status. And here's why that's important. What you're donating to is actually to that mother group, even if it's earmarked for that really bad group underneath them. But that means that they don't have to disclose barely anything. So me as a researcher in the public square, I can find out almost nothing about some of these groups. If your fiscally sponsored project, as a huge number of them are, you don't have to make these public disclosures that registered nonprofits do. But because you're connected to a nonprofit, you get everything, all the benefits of having a nonprofit.
Sure. They use a pass-through as a shield, and I've encountered this. And then you got, like you said, law enforcement, you can go after the documents, you can subpoena, but as an investigator in the private sector, you can't do that. I want to ask you this, too, because I ran into this the other day. Have you ever encountered when you can get the documents, when you do see the disclosures and you see the list of donors? Because I know we're talking about Soros, but there's all these donors that come in sideways and everything else. I can't believe how many of them list as unemployed. And
Right.
and it's like, if you're unemployed, why are you giving $300, $400, $600 to the Ruckus Society? That alone is crap. They don't want to say who they are. They're obfuscating what they're up to. Have you encountered the fact that you see unemployed so many times?
Well, the individual donors won't be disclosed in the public realm, so I won't see it. I won't see that so often. I mean, I've heard about it in the cases that get publicized when there's actual cases that enters court. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. But in regards to these, I would not have access to that information. But what we can see to some degree are the declared revenue streams and how much people are getting paid. And oh boy, let me tell you,
Oh, they make
hating
bank.
Jews and hating America, that's a profitable business model. I mean, these
Hmm.
guys can bash capitalism all they want, but man, when bad things happen and they help hurt people, they make more money. Like they
Oh,
have a financial interest in all of this bad stuff happening.
yeah, no, it's a career path. I've made this point on the air with Fox. I've said what people don't understand is not only that is this a career path, it is a lucrative career path. They are taking money from useful idiots who give them money, and I use useful idiots not as a pejorative. That is the old Leninist term for people who are essentially, advocating and supporting Marxism, but don't really realize it. And it was the term that was applied to Westerners. And the numbers of the people that put themselves in charge of these things, when you peel back the layers, very often they're sitting as the heads of two or three different groups. They're taking 300,000 a year from this one, 400,000 from this one, 250 from this one, and you realize, wow, this person is a quote unquote nonprofit activist who is out earning me, and I got more degrees than a thermometer, and so I'm on TV and all this other crap, and I look at the money they're making, and I'm saying, gee, I should have been an activist.
Right. That's true. What's funny is people think like the activists are actually out getting arrested are the ones making the money. Like, no, they're such useful idiots. Those are the ones that like they make no money usually.
Yeah.
Usually that's like self-funded. That the people that do the worst simple things are the cheapest. That's their own money. They're getting money from friends. They might get money from a nonprofit, but usually it's like those acts by Antifa are self-funded. Maybe they get free legal defense sometimes from groups like the National Lawyers Guild, which, by the way, legitimized the October 7th attacks. But
Oh yeah,
then media
I know
cites
them.
them as if they're just objective lawyers that care about civil liberties. But they think October 7th, that wasn't so bad. But yeah, the people making money are those that actually get hired to do the fundraising, who run the bureaucracy of these nonprofits and create the ecosystem, the assembly line that leads to the creation of these militants. And that's where the money is at.
And it's very self-perpetuating because among the foot soldiers, the ones that are higher functioning ultimately rise up. They become the management class. They have all
Mhm.
kinds of incentive to do so. And the thing goes on, and what they do also is they sue government. You have useful idiot mayors like we had here in De Blasio, who just as a matter of policy settle. And so
Mhm.
they'll get six, seven figures settlements, and it just goes into the hopper, and they just continue to disrupt and do what they do. And look, nobody's not saying that they can't have their First Amendment rights. They can protest, they can scream, they can yell, they can go on TV, but they can't take over campuses. They can't kidnap custodians. They can't attack ICE. They can't throw Molotov cocktails. They can't burn down federal courthouses. And this is the crap that is being countenanced. We're running out of time, Ryan, but I want to give you the last word here. Tell us where you're going now. This report, I think, has made a real dent. They got a lot of people's attention, and I think it was long overdue. So, Godspeed to you. What are you doing next? Because very clearly you're over the target.
Well, we just released a report about the housing justice
I
movement.
saw this. Yeah.
Yeah, so that came out, and then the group that we partner with, Discovery Institute, actually gave it to the president on live TV during the Antifa roundtable, which was interesting to see. And he met with the officials afterwards, relevant to that. So that might be a new angle that most people don't know about, is how extremists, including Antifa anarchists, exploit the movement to give basically free housing to everybody.
No,
And
they've weaponized the homeless without question. I've seen it up
it's
right up
humble, and I
close.
didn't even realize it to that degree. I mean, I knew that they were involved in the issue, but I didn't realize how it's a whole system. And so that's amazing to see. So I'm going to be systematically looking at the big funders where the money's going to hold them accountable, but also the hijacking of these different causes, because you have a lot of well-meaning people who, whether you're liberal or conservative, whether you agree with the cause or not, like that's a side thing. You have a lot of good people that want to help people, and they want to go in that direction. Maybe they agree with free housing for everybody, whatever. But then their money is essentially getting taken from them. Their cause is being hijacked. People are being radicalized through it. And so that's another angle that I hope to systematically look at, is how each cause, that there is an offensive taking place to hijack each and every cause for this common anti-American effort.
Wait till we get Mamdani here in New York. It looks like right now he's ahead in the polls. The debate is tonight. This guy, he was interviewed yesterday on Fox. Martha McCallum took him deep and managed to expose him, in my estimation, in a couple of areas. And where you're talking about is one of them. He's talking about Fountain House. Oh, it's only $4,000 a year. It's taxpayer funded. He's talking about, oh, we don't want to put them in Rikers. If you think things are bad now in the homeless sphere, wait till he gets in, because the homeless world is a power silo in New York, and New York is just a representative of all these blue cities. And he is going to only exacerbate that. We paid through the nose. It's a billions is the annual budget for homeless services here. That's just government. And then you have all of the NGOs doing what you're talking about. And once again, it becomes a lucrative career path. And yet, if I walk down 42nd Street, I can't go a block without seeing people lying around on the street. So very clearly, something is not working. Ryan, listen, man, we want to stay in touch with you. We think the work you're doing is really important. This is something here in the ops desk that we're really going to start to poke at. We've had Matt, like I said, we've had Sammy. I think the exposure of this ecosystem is paramount for the American experiment, because these are people, in my estimation, that are not on board with the American experiment. And what you're doing, and people like you are doing, I think is long overdue. So we appreciate it, and we hope you come back to talk to us again.
All right, thank you so much for having me.
You stay safe, Ryan. So, folks, that's going to do it for us here on the Ops Desk. We appreciate you being here. I am Paul Morrow, and all of you out there, please stay safe.